When a quiet neighborhood woke up to a veteran's dog causing unexpected chaos, nobody imagined the HOA would turn it into a full-blown investigation, or that the veteran would respond in a way the entire community would never forget. Before we begin, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy powerful, feel-good, real-life stories. Tom Whitaker had lived in Maple Ridge for almost 8 calm, uneventful years. He was the kind of neighbor everyone liked, polite, helpful, always the first person to shovel snow from an elderly neighbor's driveway. At 63, he had the calm energy of a man who had seen more in life than he ever talked about. A retired Army mechanic, widower, and owner of a dog that everyone in the neighborhood adored, or almost everyone. That dog was Buddy, a golden retriever with the personality of a comedian and absolutely no awareness of personal space. Buddy loved everyone: kids, mailmen, delivery drivers, squirrels, leaves moving in the wind, everything. And unfortunately, on the morning everything went wrong, Buddy loved mud. The night before, Maple Ridge had been hit with heavy rain followed by a windy storm. The next morning, the park behind. Tom's home looked like a battlefield of puddles and broken tree branches. Tom usually took Buddy out early, long before most people opened their blinds. But on this particular morning, Tom overslept. He had fallen asleep on his recliner the night before, exhausted after repairing his neighbor's generator during the storm. By the time he grabbed Buddy's leash and stepped outside, the sun was already creeping across the sky, and the neighborhood was wide awake. Tom didn't think much of it. He only planned a quick walk. Buddy, however, had other plans. The moment Tom opened the gate, Buddy spotted a patch of wet soil near the community sign and sprinted like a rocket. Tom barely had time to shout his name before Buddy was rolling, twisting, and flopping in the mud like he was auditioning for a dog shampoo commercial. Except with the exact opposite effect. Tom sighed. "Buddy, son, why?" But it wasn't the mud that became the problem. It was where Buddy decided to do his business afterward. Right in front of the HOA president's house. Martha Crowley, the self-appointed queen of Maple Ridge, was a woman who enforced HOA rules the way drill. Instructors enforced discipline. Unlike Tom, Martha had no military experience. But she ran the HOA like a one-woman command center. Grass height? Measured. Mailbox color? Inspected. Trash cans? Timed. Neighbors joked that Martha knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. So when she stepped outside that morning, holding her coffee like it was a sacred relic, and saw Buddy relieving himself in her prized tulip bed, her jaw didn't just drop. It unhinged. Buddy wagged his tail proudly. He thought he was giving her a gift. Tom hurried over, apologizing, pulling out dog bags, ready to clean everything thoroughly. But Martha had already gone into full alert, pointing one finger at him like she was calling for backup. "Oh, no, 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 no. This is a violation," she declared. "This is an assault on HOA property." "Martha, he's a dog. I'm cleaning it up," Tom said calmly. "Not fast enough," she snapped, already pulling out her phone. "This is being documented." Buddy wagged harder. He thought she was taking his picture. That only made things worse. By 10 a.m., Tom received an email, not a message, not a reminder, but a formal notice of investigation. According to the HOA, Buddy had caused property damage, unsanctioned disruption, and behavior unbecoming of a neighborhood pet. Tom stared at the email and blinked. "Behavior unbecoming?" "He's a golden retriever, not a senator," he muttered under his breath. He figured it would blow over. But he underestimated 2 things. 1, Martha's absolute dedication to HOA drama, and 2, Buddy's unfortunate habit of becoming the star of it. Because the HOA nightmare had only just begun. Later that same afternoon, Tom noticed Martha walking around the neighborhood with a small group of board members pointing toward lawns, fences, and specifically toward Tom's house. They weren't even trying to be discreet. When Tom stepped outside, they pretended to check shrubs. He didn't mind rules. He didn't mind structure. In fact, he respected it. Years in the military had taught him the value of order. But the moment things became personal or petty, he had a different response. He stood still, watching them with the patience of a man who had learned to pick his battles, and who quietly knew when the other side had already lost. And this time, the HOA had no idea what kind of veteran they were picking a fight with, because Tom wasn't just any homeowner. He was the man who believed in one principle above all. If you're going to enforce rules, you better follow them yourself. And Martha? Well, she was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Buddy, still covered in dried mud, sat beside him panting happily, completely unaware that he had just accidentally triggered the biggest HOA showdown in Maple Ridge history. The kind of showdown that would turn Tom from a quiet, friendly neighbor into the man the whole neighborhood would soon be cheering for. The next morning, Mark Thompson, already awake before sunrise, like every veteran who never truly leaves routine behind, stood on his porch, sipping black coffee. The quiet calm of the neighborhood felt almost military, peaceful, predictable, disciplined. Except for one thing, Charlie, the dog who, at that very moment, was enthusiastically rolling in a flower bed that did not belong to Mark. Mark sighed, muttering to himself, "Buddy, I turned my back for 2 minutes." He clipped the leash back on Charlie, and as he did, he noticed something unusual tucked under his welcome mat. A bright orange HOA violation notice. Not white, not yellow. Bright, screaming, fluorescent orange, like it was designed to trigger a full-scale panic. He unfolded it, expecting something minor, but what he read made him blink twice. Violation number 1, unauthorized animal behavior. Violation number 2, soil disturbance on community property. Violation number 3, excessive barking during early hours. Immediate action required. HOA board will investigate further. Mark stared at the notice as a slow, amused smile stretched across his face. So, the battlefield has shifted, he murmured. All right, let's see where this goes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't offended. He was entertained, because if there was one thing Mark knew from his service, it was that people who followed rules without understanding them often caused more chaos than the ones who broke them. At 9 a.m. sharp, because HOA presidents always run on their own version of military time, Barbara Kensington marched down the sidewalk with a clipboard that looked like it had survived 6 administrations. She spotted Mark as if she'd been tracking him from space. "Mr. Thompson!" She called out with the confidence of someone who had never once questioned her own authority. "We need to discuss your dog." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Charlie? He's part golden retriever, part trouble." "What about him?" Barbara tightened her lips. "We've received 3 formal complaints. Your dog has been disruptive." Mark looked down at Charlie, who was currently sitting proudly with a leaf stuck to his forehead. "Disruptive?" Mark repeated. "Ma'am, he's asleep 12 hours a day." "Yes. Well," she said, flipping a page dramatically. "Apparently the other 12 are the issue." Mark tried not to laugh. Barbara tried not to smile. Charlie tried to eat the corner of her clipboard, and failed, but he did leave a drool streak. Barbara gasped as if she'd witnessed an act of treason. Within minutes, curious neighbors began drifting outside. Mrs. Whitmore peeked from behind her curtains. Mr. Bradley opened his garage just wide enough to watch. 2 teenagers appeared with snacks like it was a reality show unfolding on their lawn. "Is this about the dog?" one of them whispered. Barbara snapped her head toward them. "This is official HOA business." They nodded, then continued eating popcorn. Mark cleared his throat. "Look, if anyone has an issue, they can just talk to me. No need for orange threats." A neighbor from across the street spoke up. "Honestly, Barbara, everyone loves Charlie. He brings the kids their toys." Barbara scoffed. "That's exactly the problem. He has been retrieving items from people's porches without permission." The crowd burst into laughter. Mark added calmly, "That's kind of what retrieving dogs do." Barbara gave him a hard stare, the kind generals reserve for rookies who ask too many questions. "This is not a joke, Mr. Thompson. The board will convene tomorrow morning. There will be consequences if corrective actions are not taken." Mark saluted her, perfectly, precisely, respectfully, but with the tiniest hint of playful sarcasm. "Understood, ma'am." Barbara walked away like she just won a battle. The rest of the neighborhood watched her go, then turned back to Mark. "You're going to fight this, right?" a neighbor asked. Mark chuckled. "I'm not fighting anything. I'm just letting people show who they really are." Charlie barked once, excited, clueless, adorable. Mark looked down at him and said quietly, "Buddy, I think we just got drafted into something ridiculous." And Charlie, tail wagging like an overcaffeinated windshield wiper, seemed ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Maple Ridge looked calm on the surface. But inside every home, the previous day's argument had become the neighborhood's hottest topic. People whispered, texted, shared grainy photos of Max barking at a plastic flamingo as if it was headline news. But the HOA board was far from calm, especially its president, Martha Keating. Martha was the kind of person who believed rules were more important than people. She polished her clipboard more than her own personality. And when she felt challenged, she didn't get angry. She got organized. So early that morning, she gathered the HOA board members in her living room, 3 people who usually said yes to everything she wanted. On the coffee table, she had printed screenshots, evidence packets, and even a laminated copy of the No Pet Disturbances clause. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, pacing like a general preparing her troops. "The veteran at 74 Maple Lane believes he can ignore our bylaws. He believes his dog can bark at any time of day. And he believes he can challenge my authority." Her voice sharpened. "We cannot let that happen." One board member nervously raised his hand. Martha. He's a veteran. Maybe we should handle this gently?" "Gently?" she snapped. "Miles, this is how chaos starts. First a barking dog, then lawn decorations out of season, then cars parked half an inch over the driveway line. No, we have to set an example." And so she unveiled her masterpiece. Operation Quiet Neighbor. The plan? A detailed sequence of fines, warnings, and escalating penalties, all designed to pressure the veteran. Jack into strict compliance, they would record every bark, document every step Max took outside the lawn boundary, and flood Jack with so many notices that he'd voluntarily follow their demands. The board nodded uncomfortably, but no one pushed back. No one ever pushed back against Martha. And so the plan began. The first strike, the noise citation. Later that afternoon, Jack found a bright yellow envelope taped to his door. Inside was a noise violation accusing Max of excessive barking at 6:37 a.m. Jack stared at it and laughed, because Max didn't even wake up until 8. Still, he wasn't angry. He was disappointed. He'd served in places where rules kept people safe. But here, rules were being used to bully. He folded the notice, placed it gently on his kitchen counter, and told Max, "Well, buddy, looks like we're troublemakers now." Max wagged his tail proudly. He had no idea what crime he'd committed. The neighborhood reacts. Word spread fast that the HOA had officially started something with the veteran, and something unexpected began to happen. Neighbors who barely talked to each other started visiting Jack. Some brought muffins. Some brought stories of how the HOA had harassed them too. Everyone brought sympathy. "I got fined for having a basketball hoop. They warned me for planting sunflowers. They told me my mailbox shade was too cheerful." Jack listened to everyone. Not once did he complain about his own situation, and that made people admire him even more. He didn't try to fight the HOA. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply listened, nodded, and thanked them for stopping by. Max, however, took his role very seriously, making sure every visitor received at least one joyful bark and a tail wag. The HOA tightens the rope. For the next 3 days, Martha and her board monitored Jack like detectives on a mission. They patrolled the street. They filmed Max during his morning walk. They wrote down every bark, even if it was a soft woof at a butterfly. On the evening of the 4th day, Jack found 3 new notices. Failure to control pet behavior. Disorderly conduct, dog disturbance. Ignoring official HOA warning. Jack stared at the papers. He wasn't bothered by the fines. He had seen real battles, real fear, real danger. But something inside him shifted. Not anger, not frustration, just a deep sense of wrongness. Rules should protect people, not trap them. Rules should keep order, not strip dignity. He looked at Max, who was chewing on a squeaky duck toy like it was the most important mission in the world. Jack whispered, "Looks like we need to teach them something." The right way. The unexpected twist. That evening, as Martha confidently prepared her strongly worded final notice, a knock sounded at Jack's door. It was Emily Carter, a kind-hearted neighbor, holding a folder packed full of documents. "Jack," she said, "I think you should see this." Inside the folder were copies of bylaws, inconsistencies in HOA enforcement, evidence of selective punishment, and a strange detail about Max's noise complaint timestamp, Emily explained. Martha filed the noise violation at 6:37 a.m., but the recording she submitted is from 8:12. She changed the time. Other neighbors have proof. Jack didn't get angry. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you, Emily. That means more than you know." He realized something in that moment. This wasn't about Max. This wasn't about barking. This was about power, misused and misdirected. And Jack had dealt with people like that before. He picked up the HOA rulebook Emily brought, sat at his dining table, and started reading quietly page by page. Max curled up at his feet. Even he seemed to know something important was beginning. By midnight, Jack wasn't just prepared. He was ready. Not for revenge, not for war, but for a lesson one the HOA would never forget. The next morning arrived with a kind of quiet tension, subtle but undeniable. The sun hadn't fully lifted over the neighborhood yet, and the cool air carried that stillness that comes just before something big happens. Tom stepped outside with Max trotting comfortably beside him, tail swinging like nothing in the world could ever shake him. But Tom felt something different. Something in the air warned him that the HOA hadn't taken last night's embarrassment lightly. And he was right, because parked right in front of his driveway was a white HOA truck, clipboard on the dash, hazard lights blinking, and standing beside it was Linda along with two other board members, arms crossed, faces stern, almost like they had rehearsed this confrontation in front of a mirror. Tom muttered under his breath, "Here we go." As he approached, Linda stepped forward. "Thomas," she said, voice clipped and official, "we need to discuss the incident involving your dog." Tom remained calm. "Morning, Linda. If this is about Max wagging his tail too loudly again, I'm happy to take the blame." The woman on Linda's left, Edith, known in the neighborhood for policing recycling bins, didn't appreciate the joke. "This isn't funny," she snapped. "Your dog caused the disruption. 10 residents complained about the noise." 10? Tom lifted an eyebrow. Interesting number. Almost like the entire board copied and pasted the same message. Linda ignored that. "We will be issuing a formal citation." And considering the recurring issues, she paused, letting the silence sit heavy. "The board is evaluating whether Max violates Section 4B regarding animals that disrupt community harmony." Tom almost laughed. "Max disrupting harmony? He's friendlier than half the people who live here." Edith huffed. "Community harmony must be protected, regardless of personal attachments." But before Tom could reply, something unexpected broke the tension. A door slammed open. Across the street, little 7-year-old Lily came running out of her house, still in pajamas, sprinting toward Max with wild excitement. "Max! My mom said you saved us from the coyote last night." Tom blinked. So did the HOA board. Lily's mom hurried out behind her, apologizing for the early commotion. But before Linda could redirect the conversation back to HOA, "Business," the mother stepped in front of Tom and said loudly enough for the entire board to hear. "I sent an email to the HOA this morning. Your dog is a hero. If he didn't bark, we'd have never known a coyote was in the yard. He protected my child." Edith froze. Linda's mouth tightened. The third board member looked like he wanted to disappear, but it didn't stop there. Doors began opening up all around the street. Neighbors stepping outside, some because they heard the noise, others because they'd heard the story. A father across the road called out, "That dog keeps this street safer than any HOA rule ever has." Another neighbor chimed in, "He's the reason we even spotted the wild animal last night. You should be thanking Tom, not punishing him." Suddenly, it wasn't the HOA versus a single homeowner anymore. It was the HOA versus the entire block. Tom didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Everything was unfolding on its own. And for the first time, Linda looked uncertain. She cleared her throat, straightened her posture, and tried to regain control. We'll review the matter again," she said stiffly. "No decisions have been finalized." But the board's confidence had cracked. Everyone could see it. As they walked away, clipboard tucked awkwardly against her side, Linda glanced back at Tom, frustration hidden behind a tight smile. She wasn't giving up. Not yet. Tom knew it. Max felt it too. His ears perked, his stance alert, as if even he sensed the storm wasn't over. But now something had shifted. The neighborhood had taken a side. And this time, it wasn't the HOAs. Part 5 would bring the showdown, and the lesson the whole neighborhood would never forget. By the time Sunday morning arrived, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder, not rowdier, just alive, like someone had breathed a little humor into. A street that used to walk with a stick up its spine. Tom stepped outside with Bruno, coffee in hand, ready to face whatever the HOA had come up with next. But instead of hostility, he was met with something else entirely. Smiles. Real, human, unforced smiles. Across the street, old Mrs. Dawson waved from her porch. "Good morning, Sergeant. Tell your dog to stay out of my flowers, but he's cute, so I'll allow it." Tom laughed. It was the first time she had spoken to him in weeks. Moments later, the newly reformed HOA board, now consisting of Mark, yes, the same Mark who once tried to trap Bruno in his yard, Alicia, and 2 younger neighbors, walked toward him. No clipboards, no forms, no threats, just normal people holding coffee cups. Alicia cleared her throat. "So, Tom, about the new community guidelines." Tom raised a brow. She laughed. "Relax, they're actually reasonable now." Mark stepped forward, looking like a man who had been humbled, softened, and strangely liberated. "We took your advice," he said. "We rewrote the rules to focus on people instead of power." Tom waited. Mark continued, rubbing the back of his neck. "And we owe you an apology. The HOA nightmare, we caused most of it. You just wanted to live your life. Your dog wasn't the problem, we were." Tom nodded slowly. "Apology accepted." Then Mark looked down at Bruno. "But, does he have to pee exactly in front of my hydrangeas?" As if on cue, Bruno lifted his leg. Everyone froze. Everyone watched. Everyone held their breath. And then Bruno lowered his leg, walked 2 steps, and peed on a small decorative rock instead. The entire group burst into laughter. Even Tom doubled over, wiping tears. Mark shook his head. "That dog is a menace." Tom grinned. "He's well-trained. He just has selective discipline." For the first time, Mark's laugh wasn't bitter. It was genuine. The neighborhood meeting that changed everything. Later that week, the community gathered in the clubhouse. Typically, these meetings were filled with tension, eye rolls, and enough paperwork to suffocate a filing cabinet. But this time, the room felt warm, open, human. Tom wasn't sitting in the back row like usual. He was standing at the front, invited, welcomed, respected. Alicia tapped the microphone. "All right, everyone. We have a few updates about the new community guidelines. But first, we want to acknowledge someone." She nodded toward Tom. "This neighborhood learned something important these last few weeks. We learned that rules are necessary, but so is kindness. So is humor. So is remembering that we're neighbors, not enemies." People clapped, real applause, not polite tapping. "And thanks to one stubborn veteran and his equally stubborn dog," she continued, "we learned how to be better." Tom wasn't the emotional type, but something warm hit his chest. He stepped forward. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I didn't fight a war against the HOA. I just reminded everyone that life's too short to lose your mind over barking or grass height." He paused. "And sometimes," he added, "a dog knows more about community than the people running it." Laughter filled the room. Even Bruno barked once as if adding his approval. A street transformed. Over the next few weeks, changes spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. People started talking to each other. Fences became gathering spots instead of barriers. Kids played in yards without parents worrying about violation letters. Dogs were walked, not monitored. And Bruno, well, Bruno became a local celebrity. Tom often joked, "I fought in 2 wars, but apparently my greatest accomplishment is owning a dog who challenged an entire HOA." The neighborhood embraced that joke. And the funniest part? It was true. Mark's evolution. The biggest transformation belonged to Mark. He was no longer the rigid enforcer who treated rule books like sacred scripture. Instead, he had become the guy who helped neighbors fix broken mailboxes, organized weekend cookouts, started a Dog of the Month photo board, even brought Bruno treats every other day. Tom eventually asked him, "What changed you?" Mark shrugged. "You did. You and Bruno. I realized I wanted people to actually like me, not fear me. Turns out life is better that way. Tom smiled. Welcome to the human side of community living. The lesson. Everyone learned. In the end, the HOA nightmare didn't break the neighborhood. It saved it. Because one disabled veteran refused to back down. Because one stubborn dog refused to behave like the HOA wanted. Because humor sometimes wins when confrontation fails. Neighbors didn't just learn about rules. They learned about respect, patience, community, and how one small moment, one dog, one misunderstanding can change everything. Tom later said something in an interview when the story went viral. A community isn't built by rules. It's built by people. And maybe, just maybe, by a dog who pees where he shouldn't. Bruno barked again. And the world laughed along.